Hello, everybody. Welcome once again to another episode of Money and Change. My name is Ira Robinson. As always, we are here with the Oracle of Change, the Oracle of Money and Change anyways. Stu Shear. Hello, Stu.
Hi, Ira. How you doing on this cold Midwestern day?
Not too bad. So far, so good. I can complain, but I won't.
It doesn't help to complain, does it?
It never does. Nobody ever listens anyway.
No, they don't listen. I mean, they're all complaining too. So, we have some interesting stuff this week. We've got some bank problems we need to talk about. And, of course, everybody on the East Coast has that situation with the Nor'eastern that's coming in. So we need to remind them a little bit on how to prepare if they haven't already prepared. But, before we start, we always have shout-outs. And so a big shout-out to WCET-FM 101.7 in Columbia, South Carolina. And that's Columbia Talk. So a big thanks for WCET for carrying the show. I really appreciate it. Also a big shout-out to the University of Findlay. And the Findlay Oilers are in the playoffs now. And I believe they play this next Thursday. And they have a really good record and a really good team, and hopefully they can go on into the regional playoffs. But they are the University of Findlay, located in Findlay, Ohio, a beautiful campus. Matter of fact, you go there in the spring and the summer and in the fall, it's one of the most beautiful small campuses around. Also, we have a big shout out to Rusty Ducks Custom Pens. And Phil at Rusty Ducks Custom Pens is still producing a lot of beautiful custom pens. And if you go to the Friends of Money and Change page at moneyandchange.weebly.com, you can take a look at some of his pens. And once we get his main website set up, we'll have a lot more pens for you to view. And he does an excellent job. I have never seen custom pens like these produced. Also, a big shout out to Mary Frances Rodriguez Barnes. I got it wrong again. Daggone it, Mary Frances. It's Mary Frances Barnes Rodriguez. Am I dyslexic or what? Anyhow, D52 Creative Services. And what she does is marketing, graphic design, illustration, brochures, flyers. She does strategic development of marketing plans, logo development. I mean, she's good at everything she does. So you want to check out her website at d52creativeservices.com. Also a big shout out to my buddies, Scott and Susie Phillips of the American Wood Shop. They're just, year after year, they've done a fantastic job in woodworking. And I've known Scott really since our school days together. And he's now just finished up with his 25th season of production. And they're out in Utah having a fun time in the snow. And they'll be back later on to start the next season's productions. And if you go to WBGSU TV, for Bowling Green State University television, you can check them out. And they have an excellent show. It's on PBS. And, when you're on for 24 years and you've just finished your filming for your 25th season, that says something about your show. Also, a big shout out to Show Us, Don't Tell Us with Skills and Mike and Papa Bear. And Papa Bear, has his own show. You want to tell everybody about it?
Yeah, his show is called What's Out There. It's on from 11 a.m. until noon on Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays. That's Eastern Standard Time. You guys can hear it right there at the L&M Radio Network, lnmradionetwork.com.
And also, he had Peter Kling on this week.
Yeah, he did. Yeah.
And so from time to time, Pete gets in there and talks to him about different things. And, of course, we've known Pete for quite a while and Papa Bear for a while. And he does some very interesting things. Very good show. Also, a big shout out to the L&M Radio Network and Michael Vera for carrying this show. And we've been doing it now for over 5 years. And we've had a blast doing it. And Ira and I have been working together on this show for what, 3.5 years?
Somewhere right around in there, yeah.
Somewhere in antiquity, right? And also, big shout out to Open Eyes Network. Now, I think I know somebody that works there, but I'm not sure.
He's kind of a jerk. Nope, that's me. That's me. And
That's
yeah,
you.
that's over there at my website, openeyesnetwork.com. And we also have the YouTube channel, youtube.com/C/Open Eyes Network. All over social media, Open Eyes Network on all of the different social media platforms out there as well.
We're everywhere.
Everywhere.
That's right. So if you want to listen to back editions of Money and Change, you can go right to those sites. And that includes even iHeartRadio, isn't it?
Yep. We're also on iTunes, iHeartRadio, TuneIn, Paranormal Radio. What boy? Yeah, I mean we're all over the place. TuneIn. Yeah. Lots of places available for downloading.
And we're also on YouTube.
Yep. YouTube.com/C/Open Eyes Network. That's the YouTube site.
And last week's show has been uploaded to the archives. And so if you go to YouTube, you can also catch the show there. So we're out everywhere. I mean, it's amazing. It's amazing. So, just check us out. And if you're one of the older people, right, go to moneyandchange.weebly.com. We've got a ton of stuff there, a lot of information that will help you out. You can catch our back editions of Money and Change posted on the website too. And National Bank and Currency information's there. Things on healthcare when the grid goes down. We're going to talk a little bit about that today. Be prepared videos and links and all kinds of things, including the Wrinkle City Gazette. And so we'll be talking a little bit about that today. And also, Ira, are you still working on more books?
Oh, yeah. I've got one series that I'm working on right now called The Black Rose Files. I'm working on the novel Revenant in that series right now. I'm about 45,000 words into the story right now, a little bit less than halfway. But I'm expecting I'll be done with that one here in the next 2 weeks. And then once I'm done with that one, I've got 2 more books that are prepared in that series to write. I've got another book series that I'm going to be starting with here over the next month or so that I think is going to be pretty interesting too, going sci-fi route with that one.
Oh my God. And I can only do 9 or 10 pages of the Wrinkle City Gazette.
I've also, for those curious, I have 2 books that are going to be published here in the next 2 months. One of them is called The Eternals Game. It is a fantasy book, a very cool one. I think a lot of people have read it so far and have really enjoyed it. I've also got the second book in the Takik Cycle series, the sequel to Silent Steps. That one is called Voices Carry, and that's going to be coming out probably in the next 2 months as well.
Wow. And your fingers are still fastened to your hands.
Somewhat.
Somewhat. Yeah, I know. I once knew a cartoonist at the Cincinnati Enquirer, and his last name was Engelhart, and a very nice guy. And I asked him, I said, what happens if you don't have a political cartoon to put up? And he said, well, it really gets tense, and I have a 2:00 deadline for that day for the next day. And he says, you work on it all day long in your office, and you just can't come up with the right idea. And 2:00 comes around, and that you're getting real close to your deadline, and you have to have something in, and it's serious when the blood drips off your forehead. And I said, you're kidding me. He says, no. He says, I have to cover all these news things for the Cincinnati Enquirer. Inquiring minds like to know, I guess. And he does these cartoons. And he also does Zits, which is a nationally syndicated cartoon. And very, very, very talented cartoonist. But, he really sweats it when it gets down to deadlines. Luckily, I'm retired. I don't really have a deadline to worry about, except when it comes to the show. And it really gets tight and tense because when it's 4:45, when we go ahead to set this thing up to record, if I only have 6 articles, it's like, oh my God, what am I going to do? And, luckily there's so much news out there in the financial world, I don't have to worry about just having 6 articles. I have to go through 22 different news sources every day, plus the stuff that happens to be, in other locations, other papers and so forth, to put things together that are interesting in the show that will keep the listeners interested in some of the scandals that are going on. And it's not like I'm having a bank scandal sheet or anything, but there's a lot of news out there. But before we do the news, we have to do a disclaimer. So the information contained in this presented materials is from the posting of news agencies on the internet and are not necessarily the views or opinions of the owners of this program. We are not responsible for and expressly disclaim all liability for damages of any kind arising out of use, reference to, or reliance on any information contained in this broadcast. The information provided is not offered as financial advice, financial planning, or for investment purposes, so you want to use this information at your own risk. Now, from the currency chart at xe.com, we have the euro stayed the same at $1.23, just like it was last week, to the U.S. dollar. $1.23. It hasn't moved. That's kind of strange. Great British Pound, it's still $1.38. It hasn't moved. The Australian dollar and the Canadian dollar are still at 77 cents. They haven't moved. The Swiss franc, hey, it dropped a penny. It's down to $1.05 to the U.S. dollar. The Japanese yen, hey, it's 9/10 of a cent. The Chinese yuan stayed the same at 15.7 cents. The Kuwaiti dinar dropped a penny from 3 weeks ago. It's down to $3.32. Ethereum. Wow. Last week, Ethereum was $865 for one Ethereum coin. It's now to $709. Big drop. Bitcoin. Last week it was $11,500 for one Bitcoin, and now it's down to $9,435.
Boy, that thing is fluctuating big time, man.
Oh yeah, yeah. And people say, well, don't you want to invest in Bitcoin and Ethereum and Litecoin and all this? I'm going, no. I mean, can you hold it in your hand? No. You can see it on a screen on your computer or on your smartphone, and it says you have so many Bitcoin in your wallet, but can you spend it? Can you go out someplace and go to a Starbucks if you're a coffee drinker and say, hey, I want to trade my Bitcoin for Starbucks? No. It takes about 4 days, maybe 3 days to transfer any type of cryptocurrency into spendable currency. And right now, they're trying to find out who has it in the United States because they're going to tax it. Capital gains. You can't hold it in your hand. You can transfer it around. You have to put it in a special wallet. And, if your computer goes down or somebody steals your Bitcoin or Litecoin or Ethereum, you're out. You'll probably never, ever, ever get it back. So why invest in it? Some people are saying, oh, that's the thing of the future. And we're investing money in something that you can hold into something that doesn't exist except in digital numbers in a computer. However, you take a look at gold. Gold last week was $1,323.02. Well, hey, it's at $1,322.23. It went up. Not much. Silver last week was $16.52. It's now at $16.49. And I would say if silver continues to go farther down, you might want to look at possibly purchasing some. They call that the poor man's gold. But it's got a lot of industrial uses, and it's something that you might want to look at. Platinum. It's at $952.84. Last week it was $965.82. So it has dropped in price. The same with palladium. Palladium took a pretty good jump down. It's $993.58 last week. And this week it's $977.05. I don't know what's causing that, unless it's the big scandal that they had on Bitcoin. Now, we've got some stuff from the Coin Telegraph we've got to get into here, speaking of Bitcoin. U.S. Marshals are going to sell nearly $25 million worth of seized Bitcoin at an auction. And this came from an article from Aaron Wood at thecointelegraph.com. And he said the U.S. Marshal Service has announced that it will be auctioning off approximately 2,170 Bitcoins seized in the course of various federal criminal, civil, and administrative cases. And this was stated on March 5th. The auction will take place on March 19th, 2018, from 8 a.m. to 2 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. And bidders who wish to participate must fulfill the registration requirements by noon Eastern Daylight Time, March 14th, complete with a $200,000 deposit. I don't know about you, Ira. I don't think I have that $200,000 deposit.
Not handy.
And would they take 25 cents? It's awful quiet.
Maybe a penny? Cents? Maybe a penny? I don't know.
Maybe a penny? Okay. All right. Well, anyhow, the Bitcoins will be offered in 14 different blocks. 2 blocks of 500 Bitcoin, 11 blocks of 100 Bitcoin, and 1 block of approximately 70 Bitcoin. And winning bidders will be notified privately the same day as the auction. And the range of cases from which the Bitcoins were seized is listed in the official notice posted at the U.S. Marshal Service website. And among the cases listed is that of Sean Bridges, the Secret Service agent who was convicted of stealing $800,000 of Bitcoins in 2015. The U.S. Marshal Service has previously auctioned sums of Bitcoin seized in the course of civil and criminal proceedings. And for example, on January 22nd of this year, the agency sold 3,813 Bitcoins, a sum that was worth over $40 million. And that was by today's exchange prices. And previous to this year, the last U.S. Marshals auction of seized Bitcoin was in August of 2016. They had 2,700 Bitcoin sold off. Wow. But here's the thing, they're going to sell it off and you have to give a deposit. And let's say you win that. Can you hold what you won? Think about it. You're better off with precious metals. And before you go into any investing into precious metals, you have to do a few things first. Precious metals you hold in your hand, and it's a good investment. Bitcoin and Ethereum and Litecoin and the rest, they go up and down so much. And 1 minute they could be worth $15,000 a Bitcoin, and a couple of days later it goes down to $800 a Bitcoin or $8,000 a Bitcoin or $10,000. You can't see it, you can't hold it, you just have it in an electronic wallet. But if you have precious metals like gold, silver, platinum, palladium, even copper. Copper's very precious. But you take a look at that. You want to be able to, first of all, pay down your debt. Put some money aside for emergency times. Make sure that you buy up some good long-term emergency food stores. Make sure that you get plenty of things that you can store water in and hold it, and also prepare it. In other words, you want to have sanitary water. You don't want to have putrid, unfiltered water and so forth. Then the next thing is you want to have your medications. And then you want to have suitable clothing for the climate and some type of portable shelter. Why? Because if you get like the Northeastern that they're having in uh, the Atlantic coast states, you're going to need it when you get 18, 20, 30 inches of snow and you're stuck in the house, you can't get out. We're going to cover that a little bit later. Did you know that Bitcoin prices hit a big low because of $400 million Mt. Gox sell-off? On Cointelegraph, they said Bit prices fell as low as $6,000 in 2018 due to a Mt. Gox trustee panicking and selling $400 million worth of Bitcoin. And as multiple news outlets reported, Nubaki Kobayashi has sold over 35,000 Bitcoin and 34,000 Bitcoin Cash, they're better known as BCH, in order to pay the exchange creditors for it's a defunct exchange, I'll put it that way. And the sales occurred via an exchange, which each individual sale appearing to move Bitcoin markets lower and lower. And former Mt. Gox CEO Mark Karpeles confirmed the transfers took place from December through February. And when Bitcoin versus US dollars hit $5,900 for one Bitcoin, Kobayashi had transferred 18,000 Bitcoin, roughly about $180 million the day prior. See what happens to the markets? They go up and then they go down. People sell off. Buy low, sell high. That's the main reasoning for that in any type of stock trading type of thing. We get into some scandals now. Did you know that gold and diamonds were used to bribe a banker in a $2 billion Indian fraud scandal? Wow. Gold and diamonds. This was reported in Zero Hedge. And it happened at the Punjab National Bank, one of India's largest state-owned financial institutions. And there was nearly a $2 billion lending fraud allegedly masterminded by Nirav Modi, M-O-D-I, a famous celebrity jeweler and one of India's richest men. And still, investigators are still beginning to piece together the exact mechanics that allowed the jeweler, working with a handful of rogue bank employees at the Punjab National Bank, or PNB, the Mumbai branch, and the main bank is really based in New Delhi, but this was the Mumbai branch, to pull off the largest financial fraud in Indian history. And in the latest update, federal investigators told Reuters news agency that a host of other organizations that Modi and his uncle Mehul Choksi, Choksi, who played an integral role in the fraud, successfully bribed bank employees with gold coins and diamonds to help coax them to look the other way when signing off on fraudulent letters vouching for the shell companies receiving the loans. And then it was pointed out there's a disturbing trend where the large financial institution, or the multinational financial institutions, were backing away from Indian banks, setting the stage for a credit crunch that could destabilize the Indian economy. So you see, bribery and rotten dealings in banks is just not common to the United States. Here we have it over in India. And basically, the Central Bureau of Investigation in India says that they've arrested 14 people in the case for the first time since the bribes were paid to at least one Punjab National Bank. So here's crime in India. And that could have really hurt their financial markets. And I wouldn't want to spend time in an Indian jail, would you?
Not really my idea of a fun vacation.
No. I don't know which would be worse, a Mexican jail, a Turkish jail, or an Indian jail. Well, jail itself is bad anyhow, but it depends, So I imagine the American jails, even Rikers Island, is like a 4-star jail compared to an Indian jail. All the rice and chutney you can eat, and that's about it. So, you take a look at that. And the Vatican, whoa, the Vatican indicts a former bank head in a $62 million embezzlement scheme. Wow, that's going on at the Vatican? I mean, hey, come on. These guys are supposed to walk on water, aren't they? And here, their former bank head is allegedly stealing 62 million bucks. And Vatican City prosecutors indicted the former head of the Vatican Bank along with his lawyer on embezzlement charges, claiming they are responsible for losses exceeding 50 million euros, or roughly $62 million US, on shady real estate transactions. And former bank president Angelo Caloia, Caloia, who's 78, and attorney Gabriella Liuzzo, Liuzzo, who's 94, are charged with a series of embezzlements and self-laundering between 2001 and 2008, when the bank sold a considerable part of its real estate, not 2008, sold a considerable amount of its real estate assets. And what Caloia and Liuzzo allegedly sold 29 Vatican-owned buildings for below-market prices to offshore companies involved in the scheme. And then they flipped the properties at market rates. The suspects would pocket the difference, depositing some of the proceeds into a Rome bank account that was not registered or the IOR's balance sheet according to the order. And the Vatican Bank, known as the IOR, is joining a civil case against the pair alongside a criminal trial in the hopes of recovering some of the losses. Now, if Caloia was 78 and Liuzzo were 94, I think they want to go to jail so they don't have to live in total poverty at that age, and they get a cot and 3 hots a day and free clothing. I mean, that would be, I guess it would be structured retirement, wouldn't it?
It could be.
Could be a little bit. Yeah, 3 hots and a cot. Oh, well. More scheming. Deutsche Bank, according to Reuters and Jonathan Stempel, Stempel, said Deutsche Bank is going to pay $240 million to end LIBOR rigging lawsuit in the U.S. I thought that was already taken care of, but no, it's still going on. And the report came out from Reuters that said Deutsche Bank AG has agreed to pay $240 million to settle private U.S. antitrust litigation, accusing it of conspiring with other banks to manipulate the LIBOR benchmark interest rate. And we talked about that years ago. Well, probably 3 years ago. And now they're just getting down to the settlement. And the preliminary settlement with the German bank was disclosed in filings on Tuesday with the U.S. District Court in Manhattan and requires a judge's approval. Now, Deutsche Bank's the third bank to resolve claims by so-called over-the-counter investors that transacted directly with the banks on a panel to determine LIBOR, the London Interbank Offering Rate. Citigroup reached a similar $130 million settlement last July. And the British bank Barclays settled for $120 million. And, Deutsche Bank said, we didn't do anything wrong, but they settled to avoid the risks, cost, and distraction of litigations, according to the court papers. Now, LIBOR, or the London Interbank Offer Rate, is used by banks to set rates on hundreds of trillions of dollars of credit card, mortgage, student loan, and other transactions and to determine the cost of borrowing from each other. Investors, including the city of Baltimore and Yale University in New Haven, Connecticut, had accused 16 banks of conspiring to manipulate LIBOR in the private investigation that began in 2011. And you notice that it said you had transactions like credit card, mortgage, and student loans. Mortgage and student loan bubbles are gigantic. And people are having a hard time paying those back. You know, I was going through a bunch of news reports today, and I believe in Vancouver, the government there has so many vacant houses exist in Vancouver that they're actually going to tax them 1% for being vacant. So if you have a house that's on the market and it might be $550,000, they are going to go ahead and tax you an extra 1% because it's vacant. It's not being utilized. It's just an investment property. And there's a big housing bubble up in Vancouver. If it crashes, hey, they've got a big problem in Canada. If the student loan bubble crisis gets any worse here, we're going to have a big crisis. That bubble bursts, I don't know who's going to bail out who. Take a look at mortgages. Yeah, we've got that. Subprime loans, we've got that. Car loans that are subprime, we've got that. They all start to burst, we've got problems. Then you take a look at California and their public employee retirement system. You know, we talked about that last week. Who's going to bail them out? Chances are it's going to be taxpayers. And we're all going to get the shaft from that. Take a look at Illinois, Massachusetts, New York. Their public employee retirement systems. They're in bad shape. And if those bubbles burst, we're going to be in really bad shape. Well, going on with Wells Fargo and Company, and I think, Ira, you know that bank better than I do.
All too well.
You got it all too well. Well, Wells Fargo is reviewing the wealth business for possible customer abuse, according to a filing. And it said from Reuters, it said Wells Fargo and Company is examining its wealth and investment management business for possible customer abuse, including overcharging and inappropriate referrals after inquiries from government agencies were made. The third largest U.S. bank board of directors is looking at whether customers in its smallest businesses or its 401k plans, certain alternative investments and brokerage operations, according to its annual 10-K U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission filing. The U.S. Justice Department instructed the Wells Fargo Bank in late 2017 to investigate its wealth management business after whistleblowers accused the bank of pushing non-essential products or services on its customers. And that came from a report in the Wall Street Journal. Wells Fargo spokesman Kathleen Leary directed Reuters to a statement by Chief Executive Tim Sloan for Wells Fargo Bank, who said the review happened after inquiries from government agencies were made. And when we discover a problem, we're going to move forward and find out what the root cause is to fix it. And Sloan emphasized that Wells Fargo's effort is going to be more transparent as it discovers new issues. And the bank found evidence that some customer accounts were improperly closed or their funds were improperly frozen, and that customers were enrolled in add-on products like identity theft protection, and they didn't request it. Sounds familiar to when they were opening up other things and not telling their customers, fraudulent accounts and so forth. I think Iceland had the best thing out there. Put them in jail. Don't just give them a fine. Just don't slap their hands. If you can trace it all the way back up the line to the top executives, put them in jail. Maybe an Indian jail would work. Maybe a jail out in the Nevada Proving Grounds would work.
I would totally be behind that one.
Well, yeah, you can get your food cooked before you get it. Could you imagine that? Helicopter comes in with frozen turkeys, and as soon as it gets close to the proving range, they're cooked? Well, probably not. But anyhow, it's a nice thought. But you take a look at the banks that have caused the problems. Were the directors of the banks involved? Did they have knowledge of it? Did the bank presidents have knowledge of it? Did the subordinates under them have knowledge of it? Or did this just come from a branch manager saying, oh, we're going to make our numbers look better, so you better do this or you get fired? Who knows? But Iceland had the best way to do it. You just put them in jail on an island, and they just sit there and look at the beautiful snow-capped mountains, and they have to basically fish and repent because there's nothing for them to do on that island. And in some cases, you just want to put them on that island and throw away the key and say, here's a fishing pole, go out and fish because that's all you're going to get to eat. I hope you like cod or whatever fish they have up there. This has to stop. Just slapping banks on the hand because they're such a big institution. The FBI needs to investigate them. The Fed needs to Well, the Fed needs to be investigated itself, according to Ron Paul. Oh, and speaking of Ron Paul, he had an amendment to the Senate banking bill. It's called Audit the Fed. Now, I'm not sure that this is going to go through, but I wish they would. And it came out in truthandmedia.com with the Jay Smeropoulos, Syrmopolous. Sounds like he's Greek. But Senator Rand Paul from Kentucky announced on March 5th that he will introduce his Audit the Fed legislation, which would permit a full audit of the Federal Reserve System, as an amendment to the Senate banking bill. The Senate is expected to vote on the banking bill, which is S for Senate 2155. And it's officially known as the Economic Growth, Regulatory Relief, and Consumer Protection Act. And he said, while we've made great strides in the reviving of our economy through curbing overzealous regulation and cutting taxes, lasting prosperity will escape us if we don't hold the enabler of big government and our astronomical national debt accountable. It's time for the Senate to side with the American people by removing the shackles on the congressional oversight and lifting the Fed's veil of secrecy. It's time for us to pass Audit the Fed, said Ron Paul. And passage of the Federal Reserve Transparency Act, which is Senate Bill 16, commonly referred to as Audit the Fed legislation, would require the nonpartisan Independent Government Accounting Office, or GAO, to conduct a thorough audit of the Federal Reserve's Board of Governors and the reserve banks within 1 year of the bill's passage, and to report back to the Congress within 90 days of completing the audit. And Ron Paul remains steadfast in his commitment to the legislation that he and his father, which is former Representative Ron Paul from Texas, worked for years to pass, with the intent to stop the Federal Reserve's unchecked and unarguably unconstitutional meddling in the free market economy. Didn't they just start an audit on the Pentagon?
I do believe they did. Yeah.
And so that'll be ongoing for a year. So you want to find out where all your money went at the Pentagon. And then if they audit the Fed, we'll actually find out how things are actually running at the Fed, which is the Federal Reserve, and to see how crooked things can get. It's amazing that, the Pentagon would spend, or even going, I think, back to NASA in the old days, $600 for a toilet seat for the space station. That's awful expensive. And I think somebody would be able to make a toilet seat for less than $600. Or a $300 hammer to be used in space. Some of the things that are charged because the government is asking for it is astronomical. And it's just, when I worked for the state, our purchases were just, if you could go out and buy things from a regular vendor, which in a lot of cases you could, you would save money. But if you had to go to a special state negotiated contract, you lost money. And the biggest example I had was if I needed a filing cabinet for one of my facilities, I would have to go to the state contract and get it through OPI, which is Ohio Penal Industries. You had to buy everything through them. And for a $200 HON, H-O-N, 4-drawer file cabinet, which would be $200, I had to pay $800. And the only thing that OPI did would be to purchase them and then mark them up to $800. And that was taxpayer money that had to go for that. I mean, that's $600 wasted of taxpayer money. I did not like that. And there were other things you had to do. And you were helpless. You could not make any changes to that. And if state purchasing said, well, that's what it is, you were bound to do that. And they weren't going to change. And I doubt if they have changed in the past 10 or 15 years. But you take a look at everything that's going on in the Federal Reserve. We have a huge bubble in the stock market created by easy money, free money. Everybody has it. And the Federal Reserve will hand you bouquets of money. But there will be repercussions, and that all will be in the downturn. There will be a response or a reaction to all of this extra money, like quantitative easing. What did they do? Print more money, print more money, print more money. QE1, QE2, QE3, QE4, print more money, print more money. And what that does is cause inflation. Yeah, it's cheap money, but we should have bit the bullet, 8 years ago, 10 years ago. All of this extra money that's been thrown out there, you end up with inflation. It's going to come back to bite us. I mean, right now on the U.S. debt clock, and I'm looking at that from the moneyandchange.weebly.com page, we have a $20,857,771,000,000 debt. That's $63,726 per citizen. And per taxpayer, it's $172,129. Do we have that? I don't.
Not on me, no.
No, am I ever going to be able to pay it? You want to take it in Bitcoin? Have fun holding that. There's so much stuff out there. And, if we had to go back and start paying the bills for all this, we're broke. I mean, I think last week we were talking about $203 trillion in debt. If you consider everything that's going on in world debt, If you take a look at what's going on in the United States, it was something like $70 trillion in debt when everything's reconsidered. It's scary. And we had an article from Chris Martenson at peakprosperity.com. He said the worst threat we face is right here at home. And he said the Federal Reserve is ruining us. And he said last week volatility made a long overdue return to the U.S. and global equity markets. It began with a 2-day payback or back-to-back violent drop. Day 3 saw a big rebound swiftly, followed by 2 more days of gut-wrenching losses. And then finally, last Friday, the day saw massive swings, both high and low, ending with a huge upside run. And during this period, the S&P or Standard & Poor's 500 lost more than 300 points. And since then, the market's been rising steadily. Is the danger past? Are the markets safe once more? And if so, did the markets recover organically? Or were they rescued by the Plunge Protection Team or the PPT? Well, it depends. If an intervention was rare and we could almost justify it if it took the form of a simple prearranged circuit breaker that shuts the market down for a cooling off after they've moved too far too fast, well, that already exists with the PPT, the Plunge Protection Team. But if such market interventions were routine, persistent, and generally depended on by the major market participants, then they're highly destructive over the long term, says Chris Martenson. And he said insiders get stinking rich by front-running the scheme. Normal adjustments are prevented, allowing dangerous bubbles of extreme overvaluation to form while fostering malinvestments. And you do this long enough and you end up with a deformed economy and eroded social structure and the markets that no longer function as appropriate mechanisms for capital distribution and economic signaling. And basically that's where we find ourselves today. And if you consider that under the Greenspan, Bernanke, Yellen Federal Reserve, the following has really occurred, according to Martenson. Pension plans, both public and private, have been ruined. Millions of future retirees and taxpayers will not have trillions of dollars they would have and should have had otherwise to support them during their later years. Income inequality is at the highest it's been in over 100 years. Look at the middle class. It hardly exists anymore. Wealth inequality is also at historical extremes. Student debt is now nearly $1.5 trillion up. It was $1 trillion, and it's gone up since 2007. More than $1 trillion of interest payments on savings account has been forfeited, denying funds to the next generation to use in business creation, household formulation, education. Total debt in the U.S. and globally is up massively since the 2008 Great Recession. And that was a central banking accident, according to Martenson. And it now stands more than $233 trillion worldwide. Gee, it was 203 last week. Picked up another 30 trillion this week? I don't know. But, you know, when you print the money like the Fed does, you cannot create wealth. You only transfer it from one party to another. Put another way, the Federal Reserve and its foreign partners, the Bank of Japan, European Common Bank, and so forth, have been picking winners and losers for a long time. Wasn't the book on the monster of Jekyll Island, didn't that have to do with the creation of the Fed?
Yeah, it did. Yep.
What was that, 1913?
1913 is when that meeting took place. Yep, and everything snowballed from there.
Yeah, it snowballed. It's scary. Did we need a federal banking system? Or Federal Reserve? No, we could have used the Treasury and just nationalized the banks. But that happened in 1913. Maybe we need to change and go back. You never know. Well, the last one we've got is sex sells cigarettes, but fear sells government. We were talking a little bit about this before the show started. But Robert Gore from the Straight Line Logic blog says, reality doesn't give a damn how you feel. It was some years ago before I realized the visceral was a key to understanding the world. Its definition is not just a definition, it's a description of how most people perceive and interpret reality most of the time, with their emotions rather than their intellects. And that isn't an original insight. It's been around for centuries, and most of my original thoughts have been around for centuries. Aristotle defined rhetoric, three persuasive appeals, as logos, pathos, and ethos. I thought those were the three musketeers. Anyhow, the leaders throughout history who incited their followers to storm ramparts, mount invasions, or march on crusades appealed to pathos, emotions, hatred of the enemy. They led only to encounter the often grim realities that they'd signed up for. Emotional appeals kicked into high gear, and the development of mass markets and advertising, and it just got worse. Listicar's many fine features that make bulletproof logical arguments that they're better than anybody else's, and you might sell a few. Show the car in front of a high-class hotel, the owner holding the door for a smoking hot babe, her breathtaking legs emerging through a seductively entrance from the car as he takes her by the hand, and he'll sell you a lot more. Naturally, this primacy of emotion became part of politics, which has become a playpen of the intellectual infants, demanding the world take note of their visceral emotions and respond to them now. And the playpen hosts much of the media, especially social media. In education, children can progress from preschool to graduate programs without ever leaving the playpen, according to him. And sex sells cigarettes. I wonder if it sells colleges and institutions. I hope not.
It actually does. It even sells religion. I'll tell you, it does. It really does.
Want to buy a cigarette?
No, not me. But you're not a sexy girl.
I certainly hope not.
It's true, though. I mean, sex sells, and if it bleeds, it leads. That's really the way that it is in marketing. It's been that way for many, many years now. And the people that are knowledgeable about this stuff, I mean, consider it this way. There are over 7,000 public relation firms within the United States alone, and every one of them know that particular tactic that sex sells. So they use it in every way that they can. I mean, how many people bought hamburgers based upon the fact that the girl had it held between her legs? You know, I mean, in the ad that happened, it's crazy. I mean, people went out and they bought them in droves. You know.
Wow, I've never seen that. A girl selling hamburgers between her legs. I've never really seen that.
Yeah, it was a big ad campaign that they had out. I think it was, if I remember right, it was for Hardee's, or Carl's Jr. Well, I mean, they're basically one and the same, but anyways, yeah, they had a advertising ad on TV where the girl, really hot girl was eating the hamburger, and she kept like putting it, down between her legs and in her lap, holding it there, and the camera panned right there. I mean, it just.
Wait a minute. Now this is a family show. We don't want to get
into
but
that was all on TV anyways. So,
Well, yeah, I know. It gets that way. And it's
disturbing. It's disturbing because if you know what you're looking at, if you know what they're doing to you, it really should be absolutely disgusting. It really should.
Yeah, that's what it is. Well, let's switch from sex sells to how about prepping when the grid goes down. On the East Coast with that nor'easter that they've had. Actually, I think they're having a second one.
Yeah, they are.
And, you get all that snow and everything, and you say, well, gee, What do I have? Do I have any food in the house? Do I have any water in the house? Can I stay warm? Is my electric blanket going to work to keep me warm since I don't have any natural gas or I don't have a furnace or, fireplace or whatever? You have to think about stuff like that. And that's why, at moneyandchange.weebly.com, back in the preparedness section, we've been talking about that for years. We've had things there. You have to understand what's out there and prepare for it. It may not happen today. It may not happen tomorrow. But if the lights go out, hey, those old kerosene lights, the coal oil lamps, as they used to call them, hurricane lamps, they come in handy for light and heat.
Sure do.
Also your prepared foods, long-term foods. Have that. Make sure that your pantry's full. You have plenty of cans of canned food, canned meats, for that example. They're invaluable. You have to be prepared for things like that. And if the people on the East Coast aren't prepared, a lot of them are going to freeze. A lot of them are going to go on a very strict diet. They're going to have to melt snow to get their water. If they have heat to melt the snow. It's a scary situation out there. So, please go to moneyandchange.weebly.com and take a look at the preparedness section. It's there for a purpose. Also, we have the humor section. And we have to get to that before we leave today. And I know that we've only got, a couple of minutes before we get going. And we have to call it quits for the day. But, you might be from Wrinkle City if you have a very special baseball cap just for formal occasions. Or you consider pork and beans to be a gourmet food. You might have to have had a rabies shot and your dog hasn't. The lobby of Wendy's Burgers is so cold that you have to use an ice pick to eat the food. You have a picture of Johnny Cash, Willie Nelson, or Elvis over your fireplace. One of those velvet jobs. You don't have one of those, do you?
No.
No. I've seen them out on the street corners in the summer, and they're selling stuff like that. No, I'd never have that in my house.
We do have a velvet Jesus, though.
Yeah, well, that's okay. Or Vishnu and his buddies, or whatever. But velvet picture of Johnny Cash or Willie Nelson? No, I don't think so. And the theme song at your high school was "Friends in Low Places," or the only towels in your bathroom are Bounty shop towels. Well, if you have those, you might be from Wrinkle City. Wrinkle City comes out every month, and it is free. Just go to the moneyandchange.weebly.com site and go back to the humor section, and it is there. And with that, Ira, that's all I've got. I hope people donate to the Late Night in the Midlands radio network, or the L&M radio network, to keep the show on the air. I donate my time and my research to hopefully help people out. And that's all I have for this week. So have a good week, everybody, and we'll talk to you next week.
Sounds great, Stu. Thank you for everything that you do. Everybody out there, have a great week. Be safe, and we'll talk to you again soon.